so ready. Can you hear us?
Yep, we can hear you, and definitely know that you're ready. So, welcome to everyone to the OTF Connect session, the Kindergarten Addendum. What's in it for me? I'm really happy to welcome Vera Cheshow and Laura Christman to be our facilitators for this evening, and I know it's going to be a fantastic session. It's always great to see people from all over Ontario in these OTF Connect sessions, and we can all be here together to learn from and with Laura and Vera. So I'm going to pass it on to them. Now, I do want to say with this slide, if the presentation is a little small, you can go up to the taskbar at the top and go and change the percentage so it looks what's appropriate for you. So over to you, Laura and Vera.
Thank you so much, Mally, and welcome everyone. This evening's session is the first of 2 online sessions to support kindergarten educators with the new Growing Success document, the Kindergarten Addendum, which was just published in 2016. We've included a link to the document in the chat pod, or we will shortly, although some of you may have your own hard copy as well. So a little bit about us. We're 2 former classroom teachers now working as education officers with the Curriculum and Assessment Policy Branch at the Ministry of Education. I know that's a bit of a mouthful. Our main work is within assessment policy and with a special emphasis on supporting kindergarten educators with implementing the new assessment policy. My colleague Laura, after 20 years working in Waterloo, spent several years teaching kindergarten and leading kindergarten grade 5 educators in the Middle East. Most recently as head of faculty with the Abu Dhabi Education Council, and then she came back in September to join us here at the ministry. And as for me, I'm also new to the ministry. Most of my teaching was done at the junior, intermediate, and post-secondary levels, but I did spend some time teaching visual art to a kindergarten class. And I have a particular fondness, I have to tell you, for OTF Connect. When I first discovered these webinars while on leave from my school board a few years ago doing some work with teachers in Argentina. And at that time, OTF Connect was just sort of getting started, and they were my lifeline to Ontario Public Education PD. And since then, I've attended multiple OTF Connect sessions, even upon my return to Canada. So both Laura and I are very excited to be online with you this evening as co-facilitators. And now, we'd like to hear a little bit about you. So if you could take a few moments to respond to the following questions. And just before I ask them, Mally, are we doing a poll, or am I going to ask people to use Check and X for this bit?
I'm going to put the poll up. So just, the first one was A to D or A to C?
First one is A to B.
A and B, okay.
Yeah. So if you went away somewhere over the holidays, I know it sounds like it was so long ago, but really it was only, what, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? So if you went away somewhere over the holidays, please check off option A on the poll. And if you stayed close to home, would you please check off option B on the polls? Oh, we're seeing a lot of B's in the chat pod and in the poll. Okay, nice. Thank you for sharing. Our next question has 3 options, A, B, and C. So if you're in your first 3 years teaching kindergarten, would you please select option A? And if you've taught kindergarten for more than 3 years but fewer than 7 years, please select option B. And if you have taught kindergarten for more than 7 years, would you please check option C? So option A is first 3 years, B if you've done more than 3 but fewer than 7, and C if you've been teaching kindergarten for more than 7 years. And we'll just give you another minute or 2 to finish that up. Ah, yes, and if you are an occasional teacher, you can write that in the chat pod. Thank you, Alexa and Heather G. And Jeff. and to others. So it looks like we have a pretty good spread, but with a number of you teaching in your first 3 years of kindergarten. Thank you so much for sharing. Well, whether you're new to kindergarten or just new to the Kindergarten Addendum, we're so pleased to have you here online with us this evening. And we know that some of you will be or have been writing the new Communication of Learning reports this winter for the first time, and that for some of your boards, you're going to be sending those learning reports on the new template home for the first time in June. So either way, we hope this session will give you a helpful overview of some of the key facets of the Kindergarten Addendum to Growing Success, and in particular, that Communication of Learning template. I'm going to turn it over to Laura now to share our learning goals and some success criteria for the evening.
Thank you, Vera. As you can see from this slide, our goal this evening centers around communicating learning with the families of the children in our classes. As kindergarten educators, you are in relationship with families, and you communicate back and forth all the time. The new Kindergarten Assessment Policy document builds on this and, like Growing Success 1 to 12, shares 7 fundamental principles of valid and reliable assessment that lead to the improvement of learning for all our students. The policy document features an emphasis on assessment for and as learning, and further informs that reciprocal relationship when communicating information about the learning that is happening using, among other things, the new Communication of Learning templates. In order to ensure we achieve this evening's goal, Vera and I have co-developed some success criteria that will serve as indicators of success. We'll revisit these at the end of tonight's session, but for now, I'll just give you a moment to read them and to add any that you feel may be missing. You can also share any questions or concerns you may have at this time or at any time in the chat pod on the lower left of your screen.
Thank you, Laura, for setting us up for success. We'll have another look at that learning goal and reflect on our progress with the success criteria towards the end of the session this evening. Before we move any further, we'd like to get a sense of how familiar people are with the kindergarten program and assessment policy documents. Molly's going to post a link to both resources in the chat pod, but in the meantime, please choose a stamp and place it in the box that best describes your familiarity with each of these 2 documents. Remember, it's anonymous. We won't know who picked which stamp, so no judgment. We're all here to learn from wherever we may currently find ourselves. Thank you. That is very helpful information for us to know who is with us this evening. We'll try to keep this in mind as we progress through the next hour and a bit together. Yes. Is that better, Molly? Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can. I think it was Patty and
Laura,
Angela and Wendy.
Oh.
If what I'm seeing is there's definitely a lag in delivering the content, and it could just be that it's catching up. There are a lot of people in the room, so that could be part of the difficulty with the sound. So sorry.
Okay, and we'll try to get closer to the mic and maybe slow down a bit.
Yeah, it doesn't have anything to do with the speed in which you're speaking. It's the internet content. But good, lots of,
Okay, fair enough.
So hopefully, Patty, it'll get better.
Okay. I'm also seeing a few people asking about the French Educator Guide, and I will check with our French person on that, because we have somebody here at the ministry specifically working in French for assessment. And Molly, if I send that to you, once I ascertain that information, can you post that or get that out to people somehow? Can you post it with the
I can post
presentation,
it with the resources. And
Thank you so much.
If you tell me what to look for, I can look for it online after I do attendance.
Well, I'm actually not even sure where to find it. It's the Educator Guide for Growing Success, but it's in French, and they don't use EduGames. They use, I think it's called EduSource. So you may be able to find it, but if not, no worries. We promise to follow that up tomorrow and get it to you ASAP. And thank you, as ever, for our French friends. I know sometimes you have to have a little extra patience with that sort of thing, and we appreciate it. So if you haven't already done so, we'd like to invite you to visit the kindergarten subdomain of EduGains, which is the English site, where links to both the program and the addendum are housed, along with several other relevant support resources. You can navigate your way from edugains.ca, or you can check out this handy visual map. It looks like this. You can see it on the screen, and I believe Mally is going to post a link into the chat pod. And Mally, if you're still doing attendance, I can dig it up and post it. Oh, there it is. Okay. Thank you. So we're going to give you a few minutes now to explore the kindergarten subdomain of EduGains, because I know what happens. We post a link and then suddenly we lose people, and that's okay because I've been there too as a participant. So we're going to build that time in and send you on a little scavenger hunt online to locate and bookmark in your browser, if you wish, the following 3 items. So first we want you to find that draft educator guide we were talking about, and it's called Communicating with Parents About Children's Learning. There's also a kindergarten FAQs page there in the kindergarten subdomain. And you'll see a number of videos and other related resources too. So the third one's your choice. So see if you can find the guide, the FAQs page, and a video or other related resource of your choosing. And once you've found all 3 of those items, if you could give us a green check to let us know you're done, that would be helpful to us. And we ask that you try to be back within 7 to 9 minutes. And if you're back early, feel free to share some of your findings in the chat pod, and we'll chat there.
Vera, I just want to clarify. This is the Google Doc.
That's correct.
Click. Okay, I have to put that link in.
Perfect. Yes, okay. The Google Doc will. I mean, you can just go to edugains.ca, but if you go to the Google Doc, it will. For those who are new to EduGains, I think it'll just make for a quicker and easier where to find type thing. And if it doesn't, you can let us know that too, and we'd love that feedback because it's the first time we're playing with Google Docs that way. So we think it's helpful, but sometimes it may not be. Allison, next to your name, there's a series of little icons, and I think if you click on one of them or click on your name, there should be an option to click a little check mark. But we have a timer set too for about 7 minutes, so no worries. It's not a race, people. So I see some of you have green check marks, which is great. Gold stars for everybody. And if you look at the top of the chart or top of the screen, you'll see Mally's put up a little timer there. So you still have a little over 3 minutes. So feel free to start browsing one or more of those items that you found. Okay, and we'll see you again in 3 minutes. Or have a chat in the chat pod if there's something there that you have a question about or want to tell somebody else about. Feel free to post that in the chat pod.
Hi, Lori. Can you hear now? Oh, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's great.
Great. Do I leave this button open to hear the audio when it starts?
No. If you could just actually turn your mic off, that would be great. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. One of the resources you hopefully noticed posted on the kindergarten site is the Addendum to Growing Success, which is our provincial assessment policy. We'd like you to take a look at the fundamental principles listed on page 4. If you don't have a hard copy handy, please refer to the link which was posted earlier in the chat pod. Which of these principles in particular resonate with you, and why? Take a moment to share your thoughts in the chat pod if you like, or read and respond to somebody else's comments there.
Thank you. Oops. Thank you. As form of the provincial students on the web page. Are you watching the time or no? It's okay. Like Molly's having trouble keeping up with attendance. Oops, screen. Tell me when you're ready and I'll try to talk about it.
Okay, well, we didn't see any comments in the chat pod. We assume you're just deep in reflection, and that's okay. Before we dig a little deeper into the nitty-gritty of the Kindergarten Addendum and the communication of learning templates, let's review the view of children that is fundamental to our work in Ontario. In fact, this view is so important that it is actually embedded in our program and policy documents. As highlighted on page 10 of the kindergarten program, we begin from the point of view that kindergarten children are capable, competent, and curious. This is foundational to our pedagogy, to how we look at learning, and it will impact on how we communicate about that learning. The decisions we make in our planning, in co-constructing the classroom, considering materials, our intentional interactions with and about children, and our assessment practices are grounded in this view of the child. So, the view that children are unique, competent learners, rich in potential and experience, and that all children can succeed, is at the heart of everything we do in kindergarten.
So, Laura, are we saying then that we value all the different ways that children can show us who they are as learners, knowing that they and we have diverse social, cultural, and linguistic perspectives, just like it says on page 10 of the kindergarten program?
That's right, Vera. We celebrate these identities and unique patterns of learning. And as it says a little further in the program document, on page 13, the 4 frames or broad areas of learning can help us to structure thinking about learning and assessment and to make the students' unique thinking and learning visible. As we focus on communicating learning, we will consider our opportunities to capture and make visible and then communicate the many ways that children demonstrate learning. You may have some ready examples of these many ways you have captured children's learning, and other examples that we share this evening may stretch our thinking. For example, the way a child playing by herself is still belonging and contributing, or how a child who is currently nonverbal actively communicates his thinking and learning in many other ways. As we know, children can build an entire city with very few words.
Thanks, Laura. I love that image of children building cities. You know, my own 2 are 12 now in grade 7, and I was just thinking back the other day to when they were younger, and how even then we communicated in so many ways with one another, including all the nonverbal ways. Kindergarten certainly was an exciting time. So, speaking of planning for learning and assessment, we'd like to show you a short video now of some educators reflecting on how they capture the learning in their kindergarten, of their kindergarten students. This 2.5-minute video is part of a series posted on the kindergarten subdomain of EduGains. We'll show you more about where to find it in just a moment, but just a few instructions first. As you watch the video we're about to show you, please consider the connections to your current practice, and more specifically, how are the ideas expressed by the educators in the video similar to or different from some of the experiences you and your colleagues have been talking about these past few months. So now where to find it. When you visit the EduGains website, so www.edugains.com, which hopefully you still have open from our last little adventure, under the Classroom Educator tab at the top, you'll find a menu of dark purple items to the left. If you click on Video Resources, you'll see a drop-down menu. From there, please select the Observation and Documentation item. Then you'll find a series of video snippets listed. We're going to watch the one entitled Making Thinking and Learning Visible, the Importance of Listening to Children. We'll give you about 3 minutes to watch it, and then please return to the session. And I'll just repeat those for those of you who are just getting onto the site now. Perfect. Mally's posted the link we see. So if you go there into the Classroom Educator tab at the top, that should be that link there. You'll see that menu of dark purple items on the left. And if you click on Video Resources, you'll see a drop-down menu, and we've shown that to you in the box or in the slide that's posted right now. And you'll see Observation and Documentation. And underneath there is the series of video snippets. And the one we're watching is called Making Thinking and Learning Visible, the Importance of Listening to Children. It's about 2.5 minutes, but we'll give you 3.5 minutes to watch it.
And when you've finished watching it, if you could please use the checkmark that's in the polling tool, the same one in the polling tool, so that Laura and Vera will know that you finished watching. Thanks.
If you could just finish up your video viewing and join the group if you haven't already done so, we'll do some debrief. We already see a number of people have begun to post comments in the chat pod. That's great, and feel free to continue to do so. Melissa, thanks for that reminder there about privacy concerns. There's some excellent apps out there, and always good practice, obviously, to check with your board and see what board policy is around privacy with some of those. Some are board and ministry endorsed even, and others are, have some really great features, and you sort of have to see what works for you, but just make sure that you're following your board policy around privacy. Seeing a lot of comments about people posting pictures and taking pictures, and we know that we can't observe every moment for every child and every day, but taking photos certainly helps us to, over time, gather that variety of evidence, especially that observational, anecdotal evidence in the form of a photo. And then, of course, there's all those conversations we have with children, writing those down or documenting those in some ways. People have been talking about using digital technology for videos and even voice recordings. I know a lot of classroom educators use those along with children's work samples in order to analyze that thinking and learning. So that's the process of pedagogical documentation.
We know that educators have a lot of questions around things like, what's the signal to know that I should be paying attention to this child at this time, and what is the learning, what am I looking for? So we've tried to find signals that show focused learning, like that moment when you see a child or children quietly leaned in and focused, or even when you see them actively debating their theories. Or what about when you see that child who's often in one area of the classroom and suddenly starts investigating another area? We know that you consider as well who's less visible in your documentation. How might you choose to intentionally observe a few specific children on a given day or in a given context? Lots of things to think about when we are looking for the way that learning is happening and being very intentional in capturing that to share later.
So one of the things this video shows us is that documentation is the key to the focus on the learning of the child who is competent, capable of complex thinking, curious, and rich in potential and experience. And again, that's right in the kindergarten program on page 10. If you're newer to pedagogical documentation, sorry, just catching up with the slide there. If you are newer to pedagogical documentation, we also have a slide at the end of this evening that we'll share with you with a few resources that will be of support. And also, as we mentioned earlier, this is part one of a two-part series. And when we meet again in March, we'll focus a little more on specific strategies for documentation. For now, we'd like you to think about these images on this slide, which shares some of the ways you may have seen evidence of learning documented in the video we just shared. Consider how the children's thinking could be revisited, reflected on, and analyzed by the educators with children and families. And as you do this, we invite you to also consider the communication of learning templates, which are pictured at the bottom right of this slide and also found at the back of the addendum on pages 18 to 29. Again, we know some of you have just completed these for the first time or are in the middle of doing so, and some of you will be doing so for the first time in June and may not have had a chance to see those yet. So thinking about some of the ways that that documentation or that evidence was collected, was documented, how might the documentation you have gathered be synthesized to share a child's key learning and growth in learning with families on that template, for example? I'm going to turn it over to Laura now, who's going to share another handy resource for considering reporting through the communication of learning templates.
Thank you, Vera. Have a look on your screen. You see some of our friendly avatars, and they are part of some e-modules. This particular one that we've chosen is a 2.5-minute e-module. It's part of a series of short animated e-modules posted on the kindergarten subdomain of EduGains. We'll share the link in just a moment, but first we want to explain that this series is intended to support the Kindergarten Assessment Policy document as a whole, and so you will see the communication of learning templates described across a typical school year cycle. We recognize that for the 2016-2017 school year, boards are at different stages of implementation. We hope that this e-module will give you an overview of the big picture wherever your board happens to be in terms of implementing the new templates. So, when you visit the kindergarten website on EduGains, under the Classroom Educator tab at the top, you will find a menu of dark purple items to the left. If you click on Assessment, you'll see several resources. Please click on Key Features of Growing Success in Kindergarten Assessment. You'll find a series of e-modules listed. We're going to give you about 3 minutes to watch Module 4, Reporting and the Templates. Please give us a green check once you've returned to the session and we'll talk more. Thank you.
Yeah, just to clarify, there are 5 modules there, and we're just watching Module 4. It's called Reporting and the Templates.
Okay, it looks like a lot of people have finished up their video viewing and have returned to the group. So again, let's just do a little bit of debriefing based on some of the comments that we're seeing in the chat pod. One of the questions that does come up a lot is around using the asset language, and does it communicate to parents if maybe you have a bit of a concern for a child? just bear in mind that the communication of learning is only one of the many, many, many ways that you communicate with parents. If you had a child for whom you had any kind of concerns, chances are you've already talked with the family and identified some of your concerns and are working towards supporting the child as best you can. So that's one of the reasons why we really encourage you to just focus on the asset language in the formal communication of learning, knowing that you have other ways to communicate all the other things that happen with the students in your class that you can't possibly include on those templates.
Just a question about, are these templates the new reports? Yes, they are. And we've shied away a little bit from referring to them as reports because of the link to report cards. And as some of you have already noticed, they are completely anecdotal with no checkboxes or no grades on them, which for some boards is a little bit of a departure, and certainly for everyone is a departure for what's been happening in grades 1 to 12. So yes, they are reports in the sense that is a report to home to families, but no, it is not a report card. It's a communication of learning template, really, in a sense. And as Laura just mentioned, it's one of many ways that we communicate with families. Nancy, I'm just seeing your comment there. Your computer overheated. I hope it wasn't our videos that did that to your computer. Anyway, welcome back. We're glad you're back. And there was a comment too about how families seem to quite like them, and that they take a long time to complete. And we're certainly very cognizant of that as well, having come out of the classroom fairly recently. And it's a new template, so it's a new way of doing business for many of us, and it will take some time as we learn together. So you may have noticed, some of you, as you were on the EduGames website, that there's also an opportunity for feedback, not so much on the template, but on the educator guide. And for those of you who have been working through the new templates this term, we'd love to get your feedback on the educator guide, because you're the experts in the field. Is it helpful to you? As somebody who's actually written on the new templates, do you find the information in the educator guide sufficient? Is there something you wish was there that wasn't? Please do give us that feedback, and that'll be up for another few weeks yet, because we'd like to, before we publish the final version of that guide, just get some feedback from the folks who've been using it. So please do feel free to share that information, and again, it's all anonymous. So here are some of the significant shifts that our new program and assessment policy documents have introduced into kindergarten classrooms in Ontario, and some of the comments in the chat pod we're just looking through have already been touching on some of these. So just take a moment to read them over and reflect on some of the ways you've experienced those shifts in your own classroom. And again, feel free to share some of those ideas if you'd like to in the chat pod. Surely the educator guide is in draft form still, and if you go to the EduGames website, Mally's posted that link a few times. You may have to scroll up in the chat pod, but the kindergarten domain on EduGames, under assessment in the left-hand menu, under assessment, you'll see both the educator guide as well as the actual policy document and also a feedback survey, and that's also where the e-modules are that we just looked at. All of those are posted there. Yes, Allison, thank you for that comment about the ongoing communication with the ECE. It certainly does take a lot of time, because you're constantly in communication with one another, to really have a good sense of what's happening and both of your observations of the children.
You're absolutely right, Sarah. There is a lot of overlap between the frames, and that should be a good thing for educators. It just reflects the integrated nature of the kindergarten program, and we have tried to align our assessment policy with the kindergarten program. And it should give you a little bit more freedom as an educator to decide where you want to report the learning. So you may see it across several frames, and you can make the decisions using your professional judgment about where to communicate that key learning or growth in learning and even next steps.
In the next slide, Laura is going to ask you to focus specifically on that shift from achievement language to more growth-oriented comments that describe each child's learning journey. And while she's doing that, I'm going to respond a little bit to some of the comments in the chat pod.
Thank you, Vera. In this slide, we've shared two versions of a comment from Mei Xing's Communication of Learning. One is written using more traditional achievement language, while the other is written from more of a growth-oriented stance. Have a read through these two comments. What do you notice? Which one do you think uses more growth-oriented language? How can you tell? Please feel free to share your comments in the chat pod.
Laura, I notice in the second comment, the educator describes Mei Xing's growth and learning without using qualifiers.
That's right, Vera. Do you remember when we used to use qualifiers to indicate the child's demonstrated degree of mastery of a particular learning outcome?
Oh yes, I remember developing and using these handy checklists that helped me check off how well a child demonstrated what I thought they should be learning. I even had my checklist organized into 4 different levels.
Yeah, me too. But now I realize that checklists often have a limited ability to document evidence of growth, and certainly not the details of a child's thinking that I want to capture now, and how that learning is evolving. So, now I'm thinking about what other tools and strategies might be more effective for me to truly capture their growth.
I sure liked some of the examples we saw in the video earlier, with the binders and the pictures and the learning panel. I can see where those would help me focus more on assessment for and as learning. An achievement focus can sometimes lead us to an overemphasis on evaluation or assessment of learning.
You're really getting this, Vera. Our goal is to communicate about learning and the growth in learning. Maybe a starting point would be to remove all the qualifiers from your comments. What do you think?
When I read the comment on the right, I get a real sense of this child's growth and learning over the term. It's very descriptive. Well, this shift from communicating through an achievement lens that often uses qualifiers to one that focuses on growth sounds a little different to me, but I'm willing to give it a try.
Good for you, Vera. And don't worry, we'll talk more about how it went and what we can try next when we meet again in March.
I've got a lot to think about here, Laura, and I will be looking forward to that March session to debrief the experience.
That's great, Vera. And do you know that we actually had some teams piloting the communication of learning in the province over the past couple of years, and the feedback from parents, educators, and administrators was very positive.
Oh, yeah? That's fantastic. What did they say? Don't you think our participants might like to know?
Absolutely, Vera. In fact, we actually have a slide coming up to share some specific quotes in just a minute. But in the meantime, if you are looking for some additional sample comments to give you a flavor for how to write comments that capture learning related to the overall expectations of the kindergarten program, we invite you to visit the educator guide that we directed you to earlier on EduGames. I'm just going to remind you about the feedback survey that we've posted there as well. That's a fairly recent addition. It's right underneath the draft educator guide, and we invite your honest and anonymous feedback on this draft. We really do value your insights, and it will help us moving forward. Now, let's share a few thoughts as promised from those pilot projects before we wrap up this evening.
Yes, as Laura was saying earlier, there were some pilot projects with the new templates over the past few years, and the feedback was quite positive. Here are a few of the actual quotes from the projects. And these are the voices of those who've already been through the experience. So we chose these specific quotes because they captured what others had said who've already gone through the process and have shown the positive impact. We're noticing in the chat pod that a few times people have talked about the challenge of finding common planning time with their partner, their ECE, or some of the prep time teachers that are helping to cover the kindergarten class. And just recently somebody's asked for suggestions. So we'd like to just take a few minutes to open it up. Again, you are in classrooms right now, living this day to day, so you are the experts in a sense. I mean, we can tell you that it's a board decision, how these things are timetabled and so on, but I think that some people have already started sharing some really useful examples. So we're just going to back off for a few minutes and leave the chat pod open and let people sort of share some of those examples of what works for them.
Does anyone want to use the microphone to give some ideas? If you'd like to do that, you can maybe raise your hand and then just use the talk button to share. Hello? Yep, we can hear you.
Oh, hi. It's Julie from London. We were told that for this first round of communicative learning, that the prep teachers were given access to our frames, and they were only to add a standalone comment. I think our gym teacher put in 2 or 3 lines per student, and then we continued in the next part of the frame. I think she put it in self-regulation and well-being, and I think they're going to be in service in the future on how to implement a different way, but for now that's what we were told to do. Does that make sense?
Julie, can I ask you a question about that, just out of curiosity, because we're learning about this too as we go, it's a new process.
Okay.
So
sure.
when those planning time teachers are given access to the frames, are you then able to modify their comment? I mean, let's say that you're continuing to write something and what they wrote, would go better towards the end of your comment, or you maybe want to change a word or two. Can you do that?
I actually haven't tried because the gym teacher put her comments in the space before I even had a chance to start my report, so I just wrote mine after hers. But I didn't go in and see if I could change her words. But that's a good question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's probably not going to be one right answer or one solution to any of those conundrums, and it's something that we'll have to work out together. But I think, you know, and obviously a lot of trust too, right? If you're working together with somebody and they have access to the same frame that you do. I know certainly I remember my own grade 1 to 8 experience where we'd have access to the subjects we taught and other people would have access to the subjects they taught, so there was never that crossover. But in kindergarten, there's so much more emphasis on that team approach, right?
Right, and this is actually the first time our planning teachers have had access to the report cards, because up until this year with the new COLs, we were given the comments and we had to implement them ourselves. So this was kind of new for us to have another person adding comments.
Well, we're going to share our email addresses at the end of the slide deck, and we'd love you to share some of those experiences with us once you've sort of gone through it, from other teachers at your school as well, if you're willing to share and open to that.
Sure.
And you know, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Tell us all how it worked or didn't work. That would be very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome, and welcome back, Alexa. Sorry I lost connection there. Any other comments and ideas that people had for how you work together with limited time and how you can leverage things like shared planning time if you have it, or technology or other strategies that you're using to collaborate?
Sarah S. had a good question. I wonder if anyone out there has some suggestions, some strategies. How do we track what expectations have been covered over the 2 years? Now, we know that we only have to report on the overall expectations in the kindergarten program. There are 31 altogether. And you, as professionals, use your judgment about what expectation you report on for each child as appropriate. So what do some of the rest of you do to help to track that?
And you can comment in the chat pod, or again, feel free to just use the microphone. Google Docs. That's interesting. OneNote. Heather, does OneNote allow multiple people to access the document? Heather G? Heather from Durham? Thanks, Brian. Yeah, Shirley's going to write a guide on getting your reports in kindergarten done in 1 day, and then she's going to sell it on Teachers Pay Teachers. Yeah. Sarah, when you say you create a slide presentation, is that so that you can include photos and so on? Oh, yes. I should read your whole comment. Thank you.
Thank you all for sharing. You are each other's best and greatest resources. As our time together draws to a close, we want to acknowledge the emotional piece that can accompany change. While we know that our practice in writing formal comments will continue to evolve, we are also cognizant of your heartfelt commitment to wanting to get it right for those children and their families. We hope that this evening's session has offered some encouragement and reassurance to you as you continue to navigate this learning journey. Now, Vera is going to lead us in revisiting our learning goal and success criteria from the beginning of the session.
So at the beginning of the evening, Laura shared with us our learning goal, which was that we would continue to develop our skills at communicating about learning to families. So we wouldn't arrive, but we would continue on this journey. And this evening we've talked about some of the ways that we as kindergarten educators do that all the time. The new kindergarten assessment policy document builds on this, and like Growing Success 1 to 12, shares 7 fundamental principles of valid and reliable assessment that lead us to the improvement of learning for all students. The policy document features an emphasis on assessment for and as learning, and develops a culture for communicating children's learning to families using, among other things, the new communication of learning templates. And that, among other things, I think is really important. Laura, you were mentioning earlier that emotional piece, and we want to get it right, and it's this new template, and we want to do it, and it's a lot of people in the chat have talked about how long it takes to fill these out, especially the first time if it's a new piece. So we want to remind you too that it's one piece, it's one way you communicate with your families. There are many, many different ways. If you look at those 4 or 5 modules we showed you, those animated modules on the kindergarten subdomain, each of them is very short. Feel free to watch 1 or 2 of the others that just remind us of all the ways we're already communicating. So yes, the communication of learning is an important piece, but it's one of many really valuable and successful pieces that you already use. So that was our learning goal for the evening. We said that in order to be successful at that, we would be able to identify some key assessment messages in Growing Success, the Kindergarten Addendum, that we would understand how the communication of learning templates can help us communicate effectively with families, and that we would be able to locate resources to support our assessment, evaluation, and communication work in our kindergarten classrooms. So how did we do? If you could take a moment and just have a quick look at those success criteria and put a smiley face next to any of those that you feel better about after this evening, and a red X next to any of the 3 that are still significant mysteries to you. And that feedback will help us in our planning for part 2 in March. So if you felt good about 2 of them, great. If you felt good about all 3, great. But maybe just show us visually so that we know where to focus on next time. And while you're doing that, I just want to respond to some of the comments in the chat pod. In terms of the comment banks, there are no comment banks, and yes, they're to be individualized, but of course, that being said, as you all know, you have groups of children who may be working through similar things, groups of children for whom you're noticing similar areas of growth, so it doesn't mean you couldn't necessarily use a similar comment for more than one child. The other thing is, I think we mentioned earlier, in the educator guide, which you all know where to find now, as judging by your happy faces there. If you look at the back there, there's several sample comments, and hopefully those will help shed some light. They're not the only way to write comments. They're not perfect comments, but they illustrate some of the thinking that has evolved from those pilot projects over the last few years. And maybe we'll give you a sense of some of the different types of learners in your classes, what sorts of things you might write for them, how you might express different things that you observe. And you can't obviously do everything in one document, but we did try to think about some of the children for whom English is a second or third or fourth language, and some sort of non-traditional children that you might encounter in your classes, and how you can support them through your communication.
Now, I want to speak to you as a kindergarten teacher rather than a ministry representative right now, and just get you to think about when children are struggling with something new. It's messy. It takes time. There's a lot of uncertainty. There could be some emotional fallout because it's new and they're not competent yet. It's the same when we, as adults, do anything new. And this is a new kindergarten program and a new way of reporting or communicating learning. So be patient and understand. We all know it might be a little bit messy in the beginning. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be time-consuming. But just as we encourage our children to continue to stick with it and we reassure them that it's going to get better and easier with practice, please do that for yourselves. Know that we know that you're going to do your best on these first rounds, and you know that you're going to do your best. But we know, too, a year from now, you're going to look back on some of the things that you've written now and possibly shudder and say, what did I write? Oh, my gosh. And you're going to see very quickly how much better and easier and faster this process gets as you gain competence and experience and confidence. So be kind to yourselves. Give yourselves that time. We hope that administrators will also be giving you the time that it takes to master something new. So just try not to be too hard on yourselves.
Thank you, Laura, for that. And thank you also, folks, for sharing your feedback, both in the chat pod and also on the slide deck, and that will really help us to prepare for part 2. Now, before you go, Laura's going to share a wee little bit of a homework invitation to you, no mandatory homework, just if you like and if you have time, and then we will send you on your way.
Okay, again, I'd like to echo Vera's sentiments and thank you again for your time and participation this evening. We really enjoyed learning with you tonight, and we look forward to seeing you on March 23rd. Before we meet again, since our next session will focus in more detail on documenting learning in kindergarten, we invite you to find and read one or both of these monographs on pedagogical documentation, and to revisit at least one of the online resources we shared this evening. Thank you again, and if you are still working on your Term 2 communications, good luck. We hope to see you all in March.
We promised we'd share our emails with you, so please do feel free to reach out, especially if you have ideas and things that you've been working on at your school that work for you. We'd really love to hear about those. Always interested in learning alongside folks in the field. So don't just skip through that slide. Please really do feel free to reach out. And we do have a little bit of time left before 9 o'clock. I know some of you are eager to get going and share and look at some of those resources in more detail, but we will certainly be here till 9 at least, so feel free to stick around in the chat and continue the conversations, or if you have specific questions or comments, we'd be happy to answer those as well.
Surely, the best way of staying informed about the ministry documents is just to go to EduGains frequently, and often what we do is we'll have a little, I don't think it flashes, but there's a big new on some of the documents that we've released. So for example, we're currently posting frequently asked questions in batches of about 10. So if you go and look those up, you'll see where we've added new ones.
Also, you can sign up for our RSS feed, either in the kindergarten subdomain or Laura and I are actually both from the assessment unit here at the Curriculum and Assessment Policy Branch, and we encourage you to visit that website as well. There's a number of nice kindergarten primary videos there also, and not just kindergarten specific, but lots of great assessment stuff there, and feel free to sign up for that RSS feed as well, and then you'll automatically get an email anytime something new is posted. Sarah, that website is the EduGains website, but if you go to edugains.ca, you'll notice there's a whole bunch of subdomains, right? There's the assessment one, the kindergarten one, all of those. So whichever ones you're interested in, they each have individual RSS feeds, and all that means is that if you sign up to be informed, then anytime something new is posted, you'll just get a little email that says, hey, there's something new on here, come check it out. Nancy and Julie are looking for the survey. So if you go on to the kindergarten domain there, where you found the draft educator guide, just posted just below, there's the link to the survey.
Oh, Vera, I think they might be talking about the survey that Mally mentioned. They have to complete in order to get a certificate.
It's all about our educator guide.
I just wanted just so that I know that people want to still ask a couple questions, but some people are anxious to get working on these reports. So a couple of things. It's one thing that OTF Connects would really appreciate that you did was complete a feedback survey for a threefold purpose. It will provide Vera and Laura some feedback, also OTF Connects and the Ministry of Education, which I guess is Laura and Vera. So if you can access it in 3 ways. One of them is if you click on the link. This is the only live link in the whole presentation. Or when you sign out of the Blackboard room, it will take you directly to the feedback survey. And once you've done that, in a day or so, you'll be sent a link to a certificate of completion for your professional portfolio. And the other feedback link, I think, that they're also referring to will be in the resource page that will be sent out in the next couple of days as well. Probably tomorrow. So lots to fill out and lots to think. But I just want to thank Vera and Leslie for all of your ideas and support. I know as a former kindergarten teacher and having written, hundreds of kindergarten reports, it's a huge job. And you guys are going down a new path, which is tough. So it's great to have the support, not just from Vera and Laura, but also from the people here tonight. So thank you for everything, all the ideas and the support. So that's great. Thanks, guys. And I'm just going to stop the recording.